Hello, Bible readers. It is Friday, February 5th. We're reading from 1 Kings chapter 8 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 28, finishing up that letter. That's one of the things about getting into the letters. They'll go faster than the Gospels and Acts did. In 1 Kings, we are at the theological core of that book as we are at the dedication of the temple. As my commentary says, this literary unit is the product of generations of theological struggles. I mean, can you imagine how controversial this was for the tribes of Israel and all the different ideas that each tribe maybe had about how God is present in our lives and how God should be celebrated among our people? Do we build a temple for this God? And if we do, what would that temple be for? There'd be a lot of theological questions and explanations that need to go into what Solomon is trying to accomplish, other than Solomon just showing off, right? Which is always the question about Solomon. What parts of this are faithful and what parts are just to show off how wealthy and powerful Solomon has become. So generations of theological struggles have led up to this moment. And so this moment centers on the prayer of Solomon at the ceremonial dedication of this temple. The tensions between various traditions about divine presence, how God shows up, are still noticeable throughout this chapter. As my commentary says, the seams are evident. It's carefully quilted, patterned to focus on a prayer that dedicates it to God. And then notice, the temple is not a place where God is enthroned. You know, Solomon's prayer is very careful about this. It's a house for the name of the Lord. This way, God remains other or holy or transcendent, whatever word you want to use to describe that God isn't just sitting there on a throne. So God is still holy, but also near and immanent. The authority of God is there. So the temple may not be the spot where God is, but it is a reminder of God's real presence, a presence chosen by God and made good in God's covenant. And that's why there's a chest there to remind the Israelites of God's ability and willingness to keep the covenant. It's an interesting chapter. Anyway, 1 Thessalonians, as we finish that, this is where Paul continues to exhort, do not quench the spirit, give thanks always. And then, when you read that, give thanks always, does Paul really mean always? I mean, what qualifications should we put on always? He means always. And that's because Paul lives and faiths beyond the moment. Life itself is worship for Paul. Our lives can be lived beyond immediate hardships or circumstances. So even if you're imprisoned, as Paul is, persecuted for his faith, even if you're, I remember this example in seminary. What if you're in an abusive relationship? Am I supposed to give thanks? It's not that you're giving thanks for that. Paul isn't saying focus on that awful circumstance and give thanks for it. He's saying be thankful. Always be thankful, even in the worst of circumstances, knowing the big picture of God, that God is reigning now and not quite yet. So that's Paul's perspective. In the end, this ending of a letter shouldn't be dismissed. Paul says, I command this letter to be read to all of them, and he means all. There is solidarity among believers that's far greater, far more important than we can honor in the 21st century, because ancient family life, it was just different. It informed this understanding of we are all in this together far more than modern nuclear families can. Church is family for Paul. And that's why he's like, so this letter needs to be read to everybody. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.